Alright, hello everyone. Today is Wednesday, so I will be doing tactics again. So we'll be running through chess.com's survival puzzle rush and try to get to 50. Okay, so in this puzzle, here we can see that the king is here, and these squares are covered by our pawn. So this is a back rank mate. The rook will block, then we'll just capture it, and then the puzzle will be over. Okay, so his queen is just hanging. We can just capture it. Here it's another case of back rank mate because our bishops are covering these squares. So if our rook is here, you can see his king will have nowhere to go. Okay, here it's not just a fork, but it's actually mate. See, if we capture here, then our dark square bishop covers this, and our light square bishop covers this, and isn't able to block it. Yeah. So if you're wondering how I'm able to find these moves quickly, is because one is pattern recognition. In other words, I've done these puzzles many times, or I've seen these. Not that I've done these puzzles many times, but I've seen the tactical motifs many times. So the more you do these puzzles, the more you will subconsciously notice it. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I just look for checks, captures, and threats. So I see that this is already made because our dark square bishop covers this, and when our rook is on this square here, he'll be covering these squares as well. So this is just mate. Yeah, so you see that this is mate. It's the first check I see, but also because this is a pattern that I've seen before. Okay. Okay, so this check forces the king. If I do check here, these squares are covered by the light square bishop, so the black king is forced onto g8. And after that, let's see, g8, and I can give a check here. Okay, so I was initially thinking about this check, but this is covered by the knight. Okay, so if you'll picture that with me, oh, the knight isn't there anymore because I took it. Oops, yeah, that's my bad. So it comes here. So now what's the difference between this and this? Wow. I think it's the same. This would be instant mate. And this will be a mate in 2 because the bishop can come here, then I'll capture it again. But I think the puzzle will end after taking the knight because there are multiple winning moves after that. Okay, select the move. This catches my eye immediately because you see the bishop's covering these squares, and if the queen is here, it'll be covering these squares. The king will be forced into one square. It's the most forcing move. So check here, check. Then he will have to come back to the white king has to come back to f1. My queen's here, my bishop's here, and this position you see that I can drop the bishop back to g3. So these squares are still covered. Oops. And then the king will be forced onto g1. Then I can drop my queen down to f2 to check. King is forced to h1, and then I'll deliver mate on h2 with my queen. Okay. Okay, so over here in this puzzle, I see that if my queen is on h1, it's actually mate. And the next check that I look at that seems reasonable is also mate. So this is the move. Okay. Here I see that this is mate because the king has no squares to move to if my queen is here. Okay, again we look for the checks, captures, and threats. We see a very familiar pattern that I've covered in the previous tactics video, the dovetail mating net. So if I bring my queen here, you see that the king has the queen covers these squares, right? Because over here it points in these directions, and we see that these two squares that the queen doesn't target or attack are occupied by the opponent's pieces, and so the king isn't able to move there. This is just mate. Okay, for this next puzzle, we see that the queen's just hanging, so we can just capture it. Okay, over here we see we look for our checks again, and we see this familiar pattern. Okay, where we check the king here on this insufficiently defended f2 pawn. This will force the king onto h1, and over here we see that this square is attacked twice by us, okay, because of our queen and our rook, but it's only defended once by the rook on e1. Okay, and so that allows us to go for a mate over here. See, he's forced to capture because his king has nowhere to go, and we capture f the rook and deliver mate. Okay, this catches my eye immediately. Okay, and he's forced to the back rank over here, only one square, and we can deliver mate there. Okay, so we see that if we capture over here, it's just a protected pass pawn. Not protected pass pawn, but it's a pass pawn. And what we have to consider in these kinds of situations, whether the king is able to reach the pawn. So one way to calculate that, right, is after capturing, okay, we draw a box. Now, how do you draw this box, right? Okay, so you count how many squares there are to queening. So let's say it's four, right? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now you draw four squares towards the opponent king. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is the box. Now the rule is if the king is inside the box and it is black to move, then if the king is inside the box, whether it's black to move or white to move, the king will catch up to the pawn. But again, this is a general rule. We'll see in this case, okay, the king actually gets into the box. Now you may be wondering, well, doesn't that mean we lose the pawn? Well, no. In this case, we do not lose the pawn because this pawn over here on f3 blocks the king from getting to our pawn. Okay, so imagine this pawn is not here. Then we'll capture. Then king e4. Then h3. King f3. h2. King g2. And if we queen, then the king will just capture it. But you see, this rule of the square requires that the path of the king is not blocked. Now, what we see is that we play g takes h4, king e4, h3, but now the king has to waste one tempo. You see, it isn't able to get onto the h file immediately. It has to go one square on the e file, and remain on the same file or the same rank before moving into the subsequent two ranks away or two files away. But by then we would have gone up, and he isn't able to catch up. Okay, so let me just draw the tempos again. Capture, king comes here, h3. Let's say the king goes king e3. We'll play h2, king f2, and we'll promote. So this works. Yeah. Okay, so here we see another a similar pattern, the same tactical motif where we check the king is forced in, and then we'll deliver mate on this square. Again, we can't take the rook because it's being defended, but if it's not defended, taking the rook is also a viable option. And this square is as good as having a pawn, so it's very similar to the previous puzzle that we did, because our bishop's got defending this square, and so the king isn't able to escape out through here. Okay, so this looks really appealing. In fact, that's just made. That's the first check that I saw. The second would be this. That would also be made if not for this bishop over here. Okay, checks, captures, and threats. This is a check. In fact, it's a double check, which is very strong, and the pawn is being protected by our rook as well, so he isn't able to just simply capture it. After checking, he would be forced here, which is guarded by the bishop, so this is just mate. Again, this is the first check that I see. This forces his rook up, and this will be mate. Okay, I see this check immediately. But is it any good? Okay, I also see that this is pinned. Okay, so we capture, right? And he will capture our queen, but we get to capture his queen again. And if he decides to capture our rook, we'll just recapture, and in the following sequence, we see that we are up a knight, because he's got our queen and our rook, but we captured here, and finally, remember, we captured his rook as well. So if you count the material, we're up a whole knight. This is not working in his favor tactically. Okay, I immediately see this as well. Yeah, it seems like this check is what wins the game, because we see that our bishop is being defended. His king has no squares to go to. So if his king is in check right now, it would actually be a mate. The issue with this is that our light square bishop isn't defended, so it just gives our king, the enemy king, an escape square, whereas this does not. Okay, this threatens the lolly mate, which I believe is undefendable. Like the opponent isn't able to defend it. Yeah. Okay, this is a skewer. Gets his rook. Okay, let's see what do we have here. There's this mate. I think it's called Anestia mate, which is a pattern that a meeting net which I've seen before. where if this pawn isn't here, it's actually mate. But that might not be what the puzzle is going for. But let's find out. Okay, let's calculate this check. Recaptures, check. And the king moves up. And we have this check here. That is mate. So if you can visualize that with me, our pawn is here, our rook is here, and the enemy king is here. Now, this square is guarded by our rook. Our rook is guarded by our bishop. The king is being checked by the pawn. These squares are covered by the knight, and these squares are covered by the rook. So that's mate. Okay, I see this check immediately. This check will force his king in, and then we can deliver mate over here. Okay, this check seems very appealing, but it's being guarded by the queen. But we have this move as well. So now you might be wondering, should we put the queen or the rook there first? Well, let's calculate the queen line first. Yeah. Okay. So queen f8, queen recaptures on f8. Now rook captures on f8, and we see that the king is able to walk out to g8. However, if we play rook f8, and also by the way, queen f8 is a forcing line. He's forced to recapture with the queen because with the queen here, these squares are all attacked, and the king has nowhere to go. And we see that it's the same issue for rook f8. Okay, he only has one piece to recapture on f8. And the thing is, if our rook, or whether our rook or our queen is the final piece here makes a difference. Because if our rook is here, again, as mentioned earlier, the king is able to escape to g7. But if our queen is the final piece here, then the king isn't able to escape to g7 and he's mated. So we should start with the rook first because we want our queen to be the last final piece there. Okay, it's black to move. I'm wondering if we'll win the pawn race. That's the first, or we could also simply fork him first, and then promote the pawn. So in a game, pure intuition tells me I should just go for the pawn, and then after that start pushing this, because he has to waste tempo capturing the knight. So picture this with me. Check here, recaptures, and after he captures back, I'll push this pawn, and you see that I'm three tempo from promoting while he is let's say pushes here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tempo. So this is the most straightforward way. The gambling method is to just push this, slice his king out of the way, and I push again, pushes here, push again, pushes here, I promote, and he promotes at the same time. So we see that that's not really safe. So we should go for this. Yep. Okay, so for this next puzzle, this check immediately comes to mind. There's also this capture, but let's calculate the check first. So check, he probably wouldn't drop his rook back down because we'll just recapture it with the same check again. So check, he brings his king up to e7, and here we have this move, rook takes on d7. So if you can picture that with me, our queen is here, his king is here, and our rook is here. If he decides to capture the rook, then we have this very sneaky e6 push, which is a check, and it wins us his queen. Okay, but then the next question we have to ask ourselves is, what if he decides not to recapture? His only move will be king e6. Okay, our rook is here, our queen is here. He plays king e6. Sorry, I don't know if I said rook e6. King e6. Yes. Okay, over here, we'll play rook c6 check. There are many checks over here. There's this, 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 and this. But rook c6 captures my eye because if he decides to walk back up, then queen d8 is mate. Okay, in the resultant position, our rook is here, our queen is here, and his king is here. And we've seen this before. I think this is called a triangle mate. I've covered this before in the previous video as well. So again, we check him here. Okay, our queen is here, his king is here. Now he's forced to go back. Okay, again, everything I've ran through with you are forcing variations. Okay, there's no other move that he's able to do so far. Okay, so, and he isn't able to capture the pawn because that's protected by our queen as well. So when he comes down to f5, we can give him this check over here. And over here, again, he isn't able to go back up because of our rook that is guarding this, and he isn't able to just capture our pawn because our queen is guarding it. So he has two options. Either he comes down here, and that's his only move, or here. Only two moves. So if he goes to e4, then there is that? Okay, hold on. Okay, so if our rook is here, his king is here, and we can give him this check over here. Yep, and we see that there's actually no squares for his king to go to, apart from back here. And when he's there, we can give him a check here, and that will be mate. Yep. So our rook is here, queen is here, and his king is here, and that's mate. The alternative is that he drops his rook back first, but we can just continue with the same pattern, where we play queen takes on g4. Okay, sorry, his king is here, our rook is here. So he plays rook g4, we play queen takes g4, and that is mate immediately because now he doesn't even have this square to go to. So now the alternative is what happens if, okay, let's run through the variation again. Queen h8 check, king e7, rook captures on d7, and we've already covered what happens if he captures the rook. So let's continue. King e6, rook drops down to d6 check, and we already know that here in this position, if his king decides to go back up, then it will be mate. So the king decides to drop or go to f5, and here we bring our queen back to h5 check. Now over here, he has one final move, which is rook g5, but here we can play queen takes f7. Now this would force him to this one square, and over here we can play queen f4, and that will be mate as well. So in the resultant position, our rook is here, our queen is here, his rook is here, his king is here, and as you can see, he has no squares to go to. Yeah. Okay, so let's play that. Okay, for this next puzzle, I see two checks, one here and one here. Let's consider that first. So normally this check would work if there's a piece here, but now we see that the king is able to escape, and if we try to give another check, he can start running out, and after we bring our rook in, so imagine this with me, our queen is now here, our rook is now here, his king is here. We see that his king actually manages to escape. Yeah. Moreover, our pieces are being attacked as well, so we have to bring our queen out of there. So now the question we should be asking is how do we stop the king from getting out fast, or getting out from escaping? And the trick is actually to just check with the queen on h1 instead of h2. And the reason for that is because you get to bring a rook in faster. So we saw in the earlier variation, queen h2, king f1, then queen h1. You see, I spend 2 tempos, or I spend okay, another one, 3 tempos to get the rook in. 3 tempi, sorry. Tempi to get the rook in. Whereas queen h1 brings the rook in on 2 tempi. So the king needs 1, 2, 3 tempi to get out. But in this case, we only give him 2. So queen h1, check, king f2, and then rook h2. And we see that the king isn't fast enough to get out. So okay, so for this puzzle, immediately we see that there are 2 checks over here. I'm more inclined to go with the check with the rook first because I don't want to lose my queen. So that's the one I'll consider first. So check, and rook captures on d7. And over here we have 2 options. We can either continue checking with our rook or our queen. Okay, so check, rook captures on d8. Now let's first consider what would happen if we play rook takes d7. Then okay, let's say our rook is here and he just slides his king back to e8, and it seems like there's nothing left for us to do. We aren't able to check here because our queen will be hanging. We aren't able to check here because our rook will be hanging. So let's consider checking with our queen instead. Okay, so oops, rook d7, rook takes d7. Now not rook takes d7, queen takes d7. Okay, so now our queen's here. It's being protected by this rook, and now he only has 1 square to drop back to, and that what we like to hear. Having only 1 square to drop back to, these forcing variations. And so in this case, we can continue checking him here. So we wouldn't want to check him here because then he can recapture our queen. Yes, we can recapture the queen, but it's not a skewer because his king is protecting his rook at the end of after the king moves out of the way. So even if we capture the rook, he will capture our rook again on h8, and he'll be up a bishop. Yeah, so yeah, this is the same reason why we do not want to play rook. Oops, sorry. Rook captures. He recaptures our rook on d8, and there is no good continuation. we'll have to give up the file if we don't want to trade rooks. And if we trade rooks, then he's just a bishop up, and trading pieces when you are down material is not in your favor. So anyway, let's continue with this variation, and it's also the one we are considering first because it's a check. Okay, so rook d7, rook takes d7, rook takes, sorry, oh my goodness, let's repeat that. Rook d7, rook takes d7, now queen takes d7, king f8, as we've discussed, that's his only move. Now we can play queen d8, queen c8 check. Over here, he isn't able to block with the bishop or the queen. If he blocks with the queen, then we'll just capture the queen, of course. And he can't block the bishop because his king is on f8. So yeah, he isn't able to block the bishop. That means his king is forced up. And he would move to g7 because if he moves to sorry, if he moves to f7, then in this position, yeah, then we'll just capture his rook. Yeah, sorry, I was calculating if there's a mating sequence over here. Yeah, anyway, we'll probably just capture his rook. Maybe rook d7 is strong as well, because if he moves his king here, okay, sorry, my queen's here, rook is here, his king is here. If he moves his king here, right, then we have this discovery. But of course, our queen is hanging as well, so maybe it isn't so strong. Capturing the rook is cashing in the rook. The rook might just be the way to go. But okay, so check, recapture some d. Let's not make that mistake again. How do I keep making a mistake? Queen takes d7, king f8, queen c8 check. Now only move here because he wants to protect his rook. Then so now we see our queen is here, his king is here. We can bring our final rook into the game, into the attack. Rook d7 check. Now he's forced up here. Again, only move, and then we can capture the rook. Now in this final position, okay, our queen is here, rook is here, and his king is here. We have to think about whether we are hanging mate or some skewer or some fork. Okay, and we see that this pawn is actually being attacked twice, and he can win this pawn. So we should consider, after he captures here, what can we do? And yeah, I see that this is just mate. Yeah. So if he captures the pawn, so in this position, okay, we are threatening mate. Okay, sorry, I get rid of all the arrows. In this position here, if it's white to move, we're actually threatening mate. So he has to do something about that. And you can see it's mate because the queen will be attacking this file, this diagonal. Our pawn's guarding this, and the rook is guarding this. Yeah. Okay, so looks like we found our line. Okay, in this position, we see that we have control of the H file, and we can actually bring our queen over. That's the attacking move. We have no checks at the moment. Captures, we have rook takes here, and that is about it. So okay, let's calculate our captures first. So rook takes h2, king takes h2. Of course, he would want this. This is the most sensible variation first. If it doesn't work, then we'll calculate like what if he does something else. Okay, so rook takes h2, king takes h2. Do we have anything with queen h4 check? Queen h4 check. Then he will drop his king back to g1. That's his only move. So his king is here, our queen is here, and it seems like we don't really have anything. If we try to push our pawn here to deliver mate, he can just simply recapture the pawn. And moreover, on top of yeah, we simply do not have another supporting piece to deliver mate. Again, you can't mate with simply your queen alone, unless he's got pieces restricting the enemy king. So it seems like rook takes h2 doesn't work. Okay, so what about our threats? Okay, we have queen h4, and that's threatening queen takes h2 mate. Yeah, and as you can see, I'm following the order here. Okay, we evaluate checks first, captures, and then threats. So threats are simply, creating threats. And of course, the strongest threat you can create is the threat of mate. Okay, after mate, it will be the threat of winning material. So this creates a mate threat, and we see that if he captures, okay, what defenses does he have, right? Okay, so what I see is knight captures. Knight captures g4, queen captures g4, and there's also f3. Yeah, f3 because it creates breathing room, space for his king to escape. Maybe rook e1. Okay, so let's consider all these moves. So we play queen h4. If he plays knight captures g4, it will just mate on h1, queen h1 mate. And remember, you don't mate on h2 because it's being guarded by the knight. Yeah, so if we oops. Okay, so let's say queen d4. Now, what if he captures with the pawn, trying to trade queens to get rid of the attack? Then we can just play queen takes h2, and that's mate. So in this case, the knight isn't guarding that square anymore. The queen isn't guarding that square, so we can just capture and mate. Now queen h4, and what if he plays f3? Well, then we can play g3, and this cuts off the escape square from his king. Yep, and so what about finally after we play queen h4, and he plays rook e8. Sorry, rook e1. Well, this is the first check that comes to mind. His king will slide over to f1, and does this check work? Check here. His king moves out. Okay, hold on, let me think about this. Okay, what if queen h4, rook e1, and we play knight? Yeah, knight d4. This guards this square, so the king isn't able to run out here anymore. But in these calculating lines, you have to consider what opponent's defenses are. Does he have any checks? Does he have any threats and captures as well? Okay, but this seems to look good. Knight d4 seems good. Yeah, okay, seems like this is the move. Okay. Okay, here we see that white has a pass pawn that's about to promote, and we ourselves have a set of pawns, and is a protected pass pawn as well, and it's able to promote. One thing to take note of is that this set of pawns, they cannot be stopped by a king alone. Like the king isn't able to gobble up both these two pawns, because if the king gobbles up this pawn, then this one will start marching to promotion. So we aren't too worried about that. What we need to worry about now is how we're going to deal with this pawn, this rook. So again, we consider our checks. This check over here is pretty potent. Okay, we see that the king is now forced to protect his rook, and he only has one square to move to. He can only move here. If he decides to move anywhere else, then we'll simply recapture the rook. Now you might be wondering, okay, what if he moves to d5, right? So if we capture his rook on f6, then he will capture our rook as well. But you see in the resultant position, we can play king e6, and we get to his pawn first. Yeah, so we will win his pawn, and then we have two pawns, and that will be a win for us. Yeah. So what if he decides to go to f5, king f5? So we play rook e4 check. Now he plays king f5. Well, then we can use this tactic. I think it's called magnet. I can't remember what it's called. Maybe attraction. Well, where we play rook f4 check. Now, if he simply moves his king away again, then we'll capture his rook for free. So he wouldn't want that. He would capture our rook. But when he captures our rook, he's no longer defending his rook. We can capture his rook, and now we get to his pawn again. And it's the same issue that he has, where we have a protected pass pawn, and we are able to get to his pawn faster than he is. So, yeah. Okay. Now we do that to stop the queening, to protect the queening square. Okay, so immediately when we look at this position, this check comes to mind. That is our only check, and it seems really, really promising already. So after this check, he has two options. He can either recapture with the rook or slide his king to h8. So let's consider rook captures on f7 first. So bishop captures f7, rook captures f7, and we see that we have a check over here, queen c8 check, and here he's forced to give up material. But let's say he doesn't give up material first. He only has one move, and that is to play rook f8. So if you can imagine that with me, our queen is here, his rook is here, and this pawn is no longer here. Yep, and I'm sure with that said, you're able to see that queen or rook takes f8 is mate. So we see that, okay, he shouldn't be taking the pawn, or he shouldn't be recapturing the bishop on f7, right? So bishop captures f7. What if he plays king h8? Well, then we'll see that there's this other check that we have. Queen h7 check. And this draws the king out to h7, but more importantly, it gets rid of the h7 pawn. And after the h7 pawn is gotten rid of, we can slide our rook to h4, and it's mate. Because our bishop's here, it covers these squares, and this rook cuts through this file over here. So again, how I found this was through one, pattern recognition, but two, simply calculating all the checks that we have. If you notice, every single move in this puzzle was a check. Every single move that we considered, okay, check, 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 or check here, check here, check. So we see checks, captures and threats. They are in this order because maybe one, it's maybe more obvious. Okay, the checks are usually more obvious than the threats. Checks and captures are more obvious than threats, but the most important um, reason, or what I think led to this order, checks, captures, and threats, is that it is the most forcing. The checks are the most forcing, yeah, followed by captures and threats. Okay, so let's. Oh, yeah. Okay, okay. For this puzzle, we see that we have a few checks. This is which seems like a mate in one. This, and this. Okay, but I mean, we already saw this check is a mate in one, so there's no need for further calculation. But uh, if you wish to consider these variations as well, you could. This one is the most appealing because the queen on these two squares don't seem to make so much sense. The king will just capture it, and we don't really have any other threat after that. Okay, but if we check here, he moves here, and we play rook f2 check. He gets to escape as well, so it's not a variation that we really like. I mean, we could play queen e1 check, and we see that because this square is covered by our pawn, and this whole file is covered by our queen, so he's sort of forced back out here. But even then, there isn't really much we can do in this resulting position where our queen is here, our rook is here, and his king is here. Yeah, so, oh well, let's just carry on. Okay, so here in this position, we have one check. Okay, sorry, I think I gave you what my thoughts are, but let me tell you, try to explain how I got to that. First, I considered the check. Then, so rook takes d1, rook takes d1. And then I saw that I don't really have anything there. There's no continuation. And moreover, white has the open file. Then I considered bishop captures on h3, which is my other capture. Now, if he captures with the queen, then there isn't much else to be discussed. If he captures with the pawn, then there's rook g5, and that pins the queen to the king. But then I see that he has a bishop. Oops, sorry, bishop to g4, which is also protected by the h3 pawn. So then I thought, what if I just started with rook g5? This is a threat now. I'm moving from captures to threats already. If you're wondering why I didn't consider this, it's because I think it doesn't make too much sense. Yeah, even if we capture here, yeah, he can just capture the queen, and it's a free piece for him. So anyway, I looked at our threats. Okay, what if we attack the queen instead? That's a very forcing move. Well, then I realized that this rook here also pins this pawn to the king if the queen moves out of the way, and that means that his bishop is actually hanging. So if his bishop is hanging, we can capture with our queen. So the next question to ask is, can his queen, okay, the piece that we are going to be attacking, move somewhere that it can protect the bishop, okay, or move somewhere where, okay, after we move here, let's think. Okay, can the queen win a piece or deliver mate in two moves? Okay, so because we will be taking two moves to win the bishop as well. Okay, one, queen moves, two. So can the queen move take two moves to either defend this bishop or win a piece? Okay, so because when we move here, the queen's going to move somewhere. We're going to capture, and the queen's going to move somewhere again. And so all I see is that here, maybe here, where we capture, the queen can capture here, threatening to win our rook. Yeah, but we can just move the rook away, and the pin remains, so I'm not too worried. Okay, so okay, now that is something I did not consider. But of course, we can just push h5 and the queen. Now the bishop is being pinned to the queen. Yeah. Okay. Now, and we shouldn't capture the queen first because that allows this bishop to get out. Okay. Okay, so for this puzzle, I see that we can bring our queen up to e5, threatening mate. But with this move, again, because it's not a check or capture, it's not so forcing. So the king is able to move up to, yeah. Then we can give a check, but the king would slide out. Okay, no, he wouldn't slide out because he'll lose his queen. Maybe Yeah, okay, so here, and what if queen to b6? Okay, so queen e5 and king d7 doesn't seem to work because of either one of the rooks coming to d1, give him a check. And if he moves his king out of the way, he loses his queen. The only other way is for him to block with the bishop, but then that still leads to the same issue. So king d7 isn't an option. So he also has bishop d6. With that, we would capture on d6, queen captures on d6, and bishop captures on d6, and the result is that we are up a piece. But what about queen e5, then queen b6? Do we just play rook d1, and is mate unstoppable? I believe so. He will give a check first, but then we'll just move our king. But after that, after we move it onto a light square, he won't have any other checks. So I think that's it. Okay, so for this next puzzle, we see that there are two checks available. The first check, rook captures on g7, forces the king to h8, and after that we don't see any good follow-up. There's no good continuation. So let's consider knight f6. Knight f6 is works because g takes f6 is not a legal move because the rook pins the pawn to the king. So the king, because it's not able to move to g8, again because our knight is guarding that square. So the king's only available square is h8. So after he goes to h8, we can play rook to c8, check. And now black has two options. Either he blocks with the knight. Sorry, he only has one option, and that's block the knight. And after which we'll capture the rook and its mate. Again, found through only considering the checks, captures, and threats. Again, for this next puzzle, again, it seems like we are just promoting our pawn. Okay, so again, let's draw that box, right? We see three squares up, so 3 squares to the side. And if we push our pawn, okay, and we see that, okay, already here, it is black to move, and the white king isn't in the square, so we will promote. If the white king is in the square, then if it's black to move or white to move, it would still be, we will still not be able to promote. Yeah, so anyway, something we have to be careful of is not so much the king getting to our pawn, because we see that that's not possible. What we need to be worried about is if he checks here, okay, we should not capture the pawn. Okay, we should not capture this pawn either, because then he'll push this pawn and promote it. So in order to defend against these pawns, we must be pushing our pawn, but at the same time dropping our king back to squares that are near the most front pawn, if that makes sense to you. Okay, so for example here, then he gives a check. I'll drop my king back here. Then he gives a check again. Then I can recapture over here. Because you see, I'm guarding the square in front of the most front pawn. Yeah, so okay, so if he goes there, okay, so you have two options, right? This is most appealing to me, because if you come here, he can push this pawn, and yeah, if you come here, you are able to defend all the pawn pushes. Any remaining pawn push, yeah, you can just capture the pawn. And if he tries to push the other pawn, you can just walk towards it. So this is best. But let's find out why this doesn't work. Okay, if he plays this, then he plays this. Then I push my pawn. Then he pushes this pawn. Check. And if I come here, you push this pawn. But can't I just wedge my king here again? Ah, I see. But the problem now is that when my king is here, you see his 3 pawns are here. He can promote. I capture this, then he promotes. So that is why we have to bring our king here. Okay, capture that pawn. All right. Okay. So the first thing I see is capturing this pawn, or going. Oh, we are white. What am I saying? Okay. Well, the plan is straightforward. We have to get to this pawn, and if he goes for this pawn, we will reach this pawn in time. See, 1, 2, 3. And he has 1, 2, 3. So king e5, king captures on f2. Then I see. Okay, instead of if he captures on f2, we should go to f4. This prevents his king from coming up to g3. So then the next question to ask is, what if he just brings his king? Well, no, he isn't able to bring his. Yeah, if he brings his king here, right? Well, then we would push our pawn up here. And then in the resultant position, we should calculate whether we win the pawn race. So he'll capture our pawn, we'll push. Move his king out of the way, we'll push. And we see that we have 2 tempo to promotion while he's 1, 2, 3, 4 tempo to promotion. So here, okay. Okay, gotta be careful. Okay, so we push our pawn because if we move our king now, he can push his pawn. So we don't need to be in a rush to secure these squares. We know that we can, even if, and he isn't able to bring his king forward as well. So if we push our pawn, if he brings his king forward, then we'll bring our king forward. So if he moves his king, we move our king. But, okay, yeah, here. There, okay. Okay, so for this next puzzle, we see that our queen and our knight are being attacked. Oh my goodness. Oh, okay, here. So if we just move our queen out of the way, right, then he can capture our knight with check. So I'm guessing this is a defensive. We should be looking for defensive tactics to try to salvage the situation. And already I see that knight takes g4 works. Seem to work because after bishop takes our queen, we can capture his queen with check. And after he recaptures our knight, we can recapture the bishop. And in the final position, okay, his pawn is here. His pawn is here, our pawn is here. But we see that we have gotten these 3 pieces, while he has only gotten these 2 pieces. Now, what else? The other thing I'm thinking about is what if he doesn't capture our queen? So let's say he slides to queen here. Queen c6. Or if he slides to d6, if he plays queen d6, then we can just capture with check and trade queens. Yep. Oops. So knight captures on g4, queen c6, and the reason why I think of queen c6 is because if he's trying to now win back a piece, or he's trying to salvage the situation for himself. He knows that he'll be down a pawn in the previous variation. Is there a way for him to win a piece? So he tries to attack our bishop, but knight captures on e5, protects the bishop and attacks the queen at the same time. So I don't think that's going to work for him. So let's try to look for other lines. Okay, takes here. What if he plays rook h8? And we capture back, and now he plays. Okay, so he doesn't have the intermat, so queen h6 check because our knight is guarding that square. But if he did have that intermat, so this would not work because imagine if he could play, if this pawn wasn't here and he played queen h8 check, then we would have to. Actually, we could still put our queen here because this pawn's no longer here because our knight captured it. Yeah, but the point is that imagine if we couldn't block with our queen, then we'll just lose our queen. So yeah, now that we've considered all of that, yeah, it seems like this is the move. Okay, select the move. Okay, I already see that if the knight's on this square, it's a fork. We are 1 square from promotion. Yeah, so I see that this move here blocks the rook from attacking the pawn. And if he captures if white decides to capture the knight, then we have this move, check. And followed by capturing the rook. And if the king decides to capture the rook, capture our rook on h3, then we'll just promote. We have to consider other things, such as what if he checks first? If he checks first, then I'll walk my king down to his pawn, stopping his pawn from promotion. Yeah, so this seems like the move. Oh wow, that's wrong. Okay, let's take a look at why that is wrong. Okay. Maybe checking here first, then bringing the rook over makes more sense. Moreover, something I didn't realize was that at the end of the variation here, imagine I played knight h3, rook takes h3, rook c3 check, king here, rook, oops, rook captures. Let's check the engine. Okay, replay this. Oops. So if we play this, okay, then he captures. Okay, that's what we wanted to do. King g2. Okay. Okay. Ah, I see. Okay. So he just plants his king there, and our king is tied down, stopping this pawn. But it's 4 pawns and a bishop against one pawn, and our king. So yeah, and his king can just stay here. If we move our rook out of this file, then he'll just capture the pawn. Yeah. And white and black is fighting for a draw now, not even a win. Okay, I see. So all the way back at the start here, we had to knight h. Ah yes, okay, because this protects. Wow. Okay, yeah, maybe that is, yeah, and this prevents this check here as well. Okay, that's what I missed. All right, so for this next puzzle, what we notice is that there is a potential for discovered check, and there's something we can use to our advantage. We see that if we bring our knight over, this double check forces the king to h8. Moreover, that is the only square that he can move to, because these are controlled by this is controlled by the knight and this is controlled by the bishop. And we see that in the resultant position, when our knight's here, our bishop's here, and his king's here, if we can somehow check the king, it'll be mate, and we have that right here. So this is a mate in 2 puzzle. Okay, for this next puzzle, this is the only check that seems viable to me. Everything else just loses a piece. For example, here, here, here. I did consider capturing here. Then after queen captures, we pin the queen to the king, but then the queen can just capture our rook. Will be and white will be up at knight. So after the check here, the king is forced to, and is only move, forced to d2. And after that, we have a few checks. We can check either here or here. Now here, queen f2 check allows for the king to go back, and we make no progress. So, actually we do. If he goes back here, then this is mate. However, if we check here and he goes up, then we don't really have anything after that. We can check here, and he can. No, he won't block the knight. He blocks the knight, then we capture back, and he can slide his king over. He still gets away. We can give a check here, but he will. He's able to. Oh no, can't walk there. He'll walk here. Yep, and this position, our queen is here, our rook is here, and his king is here. And we are not able to create any more new threats, it seems. He's also threatening to check here. In fact, no, he's threatening mate here. So, yeah, and that will be unstoppable. Maybe with a pawn push or something. But, yep, so check here. He comes up, and this is the simplest check. This is the next check that we see. He will, again, be forced to move to king d3. Then we are able to give a check here with our rook on d3, e3, and after which he will come here, and we can capture the knight with our queen, and we see that resultant position it is made. And this is all forced, so let's use this line. Okay, so for this next puzzle, like this check is glaring straight at us. It seems like the obvious choice of move. Yeah, so let's consider this first. This is our only check in the position. So check, the king slides out. So over here we may be very tempted to play like to move our rook out of the way, and then with the discovered check on the bishop, from the bishop on the king, and we're like, oh, you know what, he has to defend with maybe something like bishop f3, and you just recapture. But the thing is, our bishop's hanging, so we can't just move our king out of the way. The thing that needs to be delivering the final check shouldn't be the bishop, because again, it is hanging. So that's it. After rook takes g2 and king h1, in order for the bishop to not be the final piece giving the check, we can consider a rook g1 check. And after the king captures on g1, the king is now here. There's no pawn here anymore. So this entire file is controlled by the bishop. and we can play rook g8 check. Over here, there is no way for white to block apart from queen g5 and bishop g4. And because they are not on the same colored square, yeah, we can just capture both pieces. They are not defending each other, and it will be mate. Okay, for this next puzzle, we don't really have any useful or meaningful checks. So the next thing we should consider are captures. But for captures, we surprisingly have 0 captures in this position. And so the next thing we want to look for are threats. Okay, so we see that actually the king has no squares to move to. This is covered by our knight, and these are covered by our queen. So if we can somehow check the king with our last piece, maybe here, if our rook is here, then that would may lead to mate. Check here, captures mate. And one way we can do this to get our rook to this position is by moving it to f5, so it forks both the queen and the pawn here. So the next thing we want to consider is what are white's defenses? Like what is stopping us from playing this move? And can the queen move anywhere such that it protects the f2 pawn or the g2 square? And the answer is it doesn't seem like it. Okay, because the reason why I said g2 is because imagine the queen moves somewhere and we capture here, then white can play rook g2. So if the queen's protecting this square, we can't capture it twice. We can't just capture it. Yeah, that's what I mean. So the next move I considered after rook f5 is rook takes on d4. So now we can't capture here because it's being protected by the queen. And if we capture the queen, then the rook on d4 will just capture our queen. And we are still down the exchange. But in that position, with our rook here and the opponent rook here, we see that we have this intermezzo, we have this check here on e2. And the queen isn't able to block, unfortunately, because of our rook here. And so after the king decides to move, we can then capture the queen. Right? Okay. So again, I didn't consider this move, but what we want to look for are intermezzos, so like intermediate moves, like checks, such that we can get our queen out of the way, and then after that, win the queen at the end. So my guess is that he's going to block the rook, but in that case, we would just simply capture the rook, and then after that, capture the queen. Okay, another endgame puzzle. Okay, so for this endgame puzzle, the idea is that we want to threaten to win his rook, while at the same time, if he captures our rook, then we can capture with our pawn and then promote. So if we play rook here and he simply captures our pawn, then we'll capture his rook. But if we play rook a6 and he captures on a6, if he plays rook captures a6, then we'll play b takes a6 and we will promote our pawn, like I just said. But what if we play rook a6 and he plays something like rook h2? So his plan now is to go for a draw with a perpetual over here. Well, then in that case, if we play rook a6, rook h2, we will, again, our pawn is hanging, so we push our pawn up. Then here, let's say he gives a check here. Check. We will bring our king up. The reason why we bring our king to the a file is because we want to use the pawn to be able to block the checks while pushing it forward subsequently. So let's say he gives another check here. We'll go to, okay, so our rook is here. Our pawn is here. Our king is here and his rook is here, so he checks us. Now we bring our king to a7. So if he checks again, then we would push b7. And it would be very difficult for him to stop us from queening the pawn. Yep, so if our king here, let's see what else he can do. Okay, his rook is here on h2, our rook is here on a6, and our king is on, oops, sorry. And our king is still here. Yes, we could just push the pawn up. Okay, then he checks. And we move over to a8. And what if he slides over here, right? He brings his king to a b5, now attacking both the pawn. Okay, attacking the pawn and the rook at the same time. Well, in this case, we can use the idea that we're using the current position we're looking at and bring our rook over to a7. So now we're attacking both his rook, and if he captures our rook, then our pawn can capture on a7. And if his king is then able to catch up to the pawn, okay, he will move up to So in the resultant position, our pawn is here, our king is here, and his king is here. It's his move, but he'll move here, we'll move our king out of the way, and then we'll promote the next move. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Oh, wow. Okay. Okay, let's see what's wrong with this idea here. I see he can go for perpetual. He can go for perpetual. No, he still can't. I mean, now I see this move. This has to be the winning move, but it's only because I see this. I know that this doesn't work. All right, let's not waste time and let's just check the analysis. Okay, let's. And what happens if we play this? Okay, check. Can't we just repeat positions? I see. Okay. Okay. See, I missed the drawing idea over here, where he gives a check. Where if I come here, oops. Yeah. So this. Yeah, b7 is a lot more straightforward. Should have seen it. I saw it, but I thought it was complicated if he captured my rook and I promote. Turns out it wasn't, and turns out that was the correct idea. This would work if he captures the rook, or if he captures the pawn. So in that sense, that calculation that I had was correct, but incomplete, because I needed to see this idea here. The king's forced here. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next puzzle. Okay, so for this next puzzle, we see two checks to start calculating with. And I'll start calculating if queen takes g2 because that seems to make more sense. Okay, so after queen takes g2, white has several options. There's king e1, king d1, king d2. Oh, sorry, king d2 is not a move. There's king d3 and rook f2. So let's consider rook f2 first. Okay, rook f2, then queen takes f2. Then again, so over here the king only has 2 squares to go to. If he goes to d1, then we'll play knight captures. Knight captures on e3 check, and this is actually mate, but the queen is able to capture here. But after that, we'll just capture with our rook, and yeah, we will be up too much material, and we're also threatening mate here. So the evaluation is over. White is winning that. I mean, black is winning that position. So it seems that rook f2 does not work, and rook f2 is pretty bad. Okay, and if queen takes g2, rook f2, and queen takes f2 and king e3, then we would capture on e3, king d3. I mean, then we'll capture on e3 with our rook, and then we would win the queen subsequently. An important thing to note over here is that firstly we are down one minor piece, and white's actually threatening mate along the c file, so we do need to be careful about that, and that's why winning the queen in these variations is crucial, because it kills the attack that white has, and also wins us back our material. Okay, so queen g2. Now let's say, okay, so the next straightforward one is king d1, because then we capture the rook with check. Oops, capture the rook with check, and the king has a few moves to make. So if he goes to c2, then honestly we could just capture the knight. So now we are up material, and the reason why we can afford to capture the knight is because the king is in the way of the c file battery that white has. Yeah, and so after the king moves out of the way, then we can maybe bring a rook up to d7 and guard the c7 square. Okay, so queen g2, queen takes g2, and now let's consider king e1. So if king e1, then we play rook captures on e3, and white has a few moves. Either rook takes e3, queen takes e3, or king d1. So king d1 is just suicide because queen. Oh no, the queen, knight's guarding that square. Yeah, but we can capture the rook first, and after the king with check, and after the king moves somewhere, let's say he moves up here, we can capture the queen. So moving the king is actually, it doesn't make so much sense. So let's run through that variation again. Queen takes g2, king e1, rook takes e3. Now let's first consider queen captures e3. This one's straightforward because we just play knight takes e3. First of all, we have won the queen, and we've also gotten rid of the battery along the c file. So the next thing to consider is queen takes g2, king e1, rook takes e3, and now rook takes e3. So in this position, we can, okay, let me just do this. The king is here, enemy king is here, enemy rook is here, and our queen is here. And we have no rook here anymore. So here we see that we can give this check over here. And we come to a similar position earlier on. And then the king has to slide over to the d1. And then after that we play knight takes on e3, forcing the queen to have to capture it, because in this position there's only one legal move, and that's for the queen to capture e3. And after that we would capture back the queen. And yeah, in that position we are art material, and we also got rid of the thread along the c file. So that's a success. Yep, and so it seems that, this is the move. Okay, we can afford to capture here. Okay. Interesting puzzle. All right, so I'm sure, in this puzzle over here, it seems that we will be applying the concept that I explained earlier of the square. So right now we actually have the liberty to capture black's bishop, and it seems like what black's trying to do is to pull our king away so that his king can get to the queening square faster than us. So in an actual game, this makes no sense because you can use the bishop to guard that square. But yeah, so this puzzle, it doesn't seem really good. This seems like a horrible blunder and mistake on black's part. But anyway, if we capture so we have to capture the bishop. That's because if we don't capture it and we start pushing the pawn, then black can just plant their bishop along the h1 a8 diagonal and control our queening square, and we will never be able to queen. Yeah, so we have to capture this the bishop. But the next question to ask is, should we bring our king back forward to stop the enemy king from getting to our pawn, to the queening square, or should we just push the pawn? Can the pawn, take care of itself? Okay, so obviously I'll be capturing this first. Okay, sorry, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I should calculate from here. Okay, so after capturing the bishop, okay, the king would be able to move to any one of these three squares. Let's say he moves here because he wants to move closer to the queening square. So now let's draw our box. Okay, 5 squares up. That means 5 squares to the right as well. Okay, and we see that in this box, the king isn't inside, and it is white to move. So that means the king isn't able to get to our pawn because he's not inside our box. You see that? Okay, so yeah, we can just push our pawn, and we will be able to promote. Okay, next puzzle. Okay, I believe this puzzle seems to be just a mate in 3. So check, he's forced to either one of these 2 squares. If he comes to this square, then check here. And he's again forced only to this 1 square, and we can deliver mate on a6. But if we give check on c2, and he plays king d5, we play queen c6 check, and he's again forced to this. He only has 1 move, and that is king e5. Then we will deliver mate on d6. Okay. Okay, for this next puzzle, I see that this bishop over here is sort of actually being pinned because it's being attacked twice, and so yeah, but knight can actually come here. If you were black to move, the knight could actually just jump to d5, and he's threatening our bishop. Okay, assuming he hasn't pushed this pawn yet. Yeah, so he always has this idea of bringing the knight to d5, and if we capture the bishop, he could capture back. And we see this idea of sacrificing our rook as well, the exchange for now, because when the queen recaptures, we can bring our knight in. And this time, he can't just bring his knight out to d5, because the piece that he's going to be losing on the e7 square is so much more valuable than the piece he's recapturing back on e7. What I mean is, rook captures e7, queen captures e7, knight d5, and his queen is here, our knight is here. He can't just capture our knight, and after we capture his queen, he recaptures the bishop because we essentially traded a bishop and a knight for the queen. So it's not worth it for him. So in the resultant position, after rook takes on e7 and queen takes e7, then knight d5, he'll probably have to move his queen away. He can move it to many different squares, but whichever square he moves to, we can capture the knight. So we'll play knight takes f6, and the reason we don't play bishop takes f6, well, it's really dependent on where he puts his queen. So if he puts his queen, let's say, on either one of these two squares, then I would play bishop takes f6, because if he recaptures back g takes f6, then knight takes f6 will be a fork. Okay, we'll be forking the king and these two squares over here. So, but if he moves to, like, let's say either e7 or d8, I'll capture back with the knight, because after he plays g takes f6, I'll play bishop takes on h6, and I'm gonna get ready to bring my queen in. So if he decides to move his rook out of the way, then it'll be made into check, and maybe he moves here or here, and then it'll be mate. So he'll have to leave his rook there and probably bring his king up, but in that case, I can bring my queen in. I'll get ready for a rook lift. Of course, not from here because the knight's still here. Maybe I have to kick the knight first, or I'll bring the rook up here, by here, and then bring it over. And so it looks really bad for black. So this rook sacrifice, sacrificing the exchange doesn't seem that bad to me at the moment. There are many other moves that we can consider, but I think this makes the most sense at the moment. Capturing here, bishop takes h6 doesn't make too much sense, because after g takes h6, we do not have queen g4 because the knight is still guarding that square. So that's okay. So he decides to just give up his queen. Okay, so for this puzzle, there aren't any checks. There are some captures, but I think this puzzle is mainly about threats. So as you get to the harder puzzles, the answer becomes slightly less clear. So I think the answer is queen f3. So I did look at, something I did notice is the position of the knights. Okay, so before we get into queen f3, let me just run through the previous candidate moves, or how I got to queen f3. So it first started with, looking at these knights, seeing how they are quite badly positioned, and I thought maybe we could win a piece by pushing some pawns and trapping the knights. Especially this knight over here, we see that it only has a few legal moves, and that is knight to a4, c4, and d5. But d5 is being covered by our pawn, so, and c4 is being covered by both our knight and our bishop, so it really only has one move, a4. Even then, that is really, really dubious. So I was thinking, how can we trap this knight? But I don't see any easy way to do it. You have to push the pawn quite far up, and it would have tempo to maybe move a pawn, or even move the rook in order to save the knight. Yeah, and chasing this knight away isn't so simple as well. You can always drop back to c6, and it's attacking our own knight. So I started to look for other ideas. Maybe there's a way to threaten mate here, while threatening maybe this knight, especially this knight, because it's unprotected at the moment. But I couldn't find an easy way to do it. And so I thought, how about I capture it here, and maybe after the king comes out, there's maybe like a fork I could do. But it seems like there isn't any either, and the king is able to defend. The king is able to be defended sufficiently well, and yeah, bringing my bishop out here is an option either, because the knight can just trade it off. So then I landed with this idea of simply threatening mate, and the difference between queen h5 and queen f3 is that on queen h5, the opponent has this move g6, and the reason why g6 doesn't help us is because we have no continuation from there. We have to drop our queen back, but here the opponent can play f6. But all the way back in this position, when we see our queen is on h5, and the pawn is here on g6, actually we should have seen this pattern. It's something that we see very commonly in puzzle rushes, and it's a common tactical motif where we capture the pawn here, and yeah, so we play knight takes on g6 with our queen here on h5, and then if black plays h takes g6, then we'll capture the rook. But in this case, white still has the f7 pawn here. So in order to provoke the f7 pawn to be pushed, we can play queen f3 first. And that's how I landed with this final move, because there is no other good way to defend mate over here. Black has to push f6, but after that we get a check over here, and then he would have to block only move again with g6, and then we'll play knight takes g6. And in that resultant position, okay, we see our knight is here, our queen is here, and there's a pawn over here. This pawn is no longer here. If black were to play h takes g6, should we capture the rook? Okay, and I hope you guys got the answer. Okay, we shouldn't capture the rook because queen takes on g6 is mate. So in this position where our queen is here, our knight is here, and his pawn is here, white's best move, black's best move is probably going to be something like d6. Reason being that he wants to create space, breathing room for his king to move out. Okay, so yep, that is the answer. Okay, let's get on with the next puzzle. Okay, so in this puzzle, the first thing I notice is that this rook is trapped. So this rook here isn't actually able to go anywhere. The second thing I notice is that my rook is hanging right now, and I have to do something about it. I should do something about it. So I really, really want to play bishop to d3, because we see that if he plays b takes d3, and then we play b takes c3, I mean, not d3, then his rook is actually trapped. Yeah. Yeah, but we have to do something about this rook first, so I'm considering capturing. And when we capture the rook on e8, it also draws his light square bishop to e8, and it's no longer attacking this pawn. So yeah, so rook takes e8, bishop takes e8, bishop, oops. Okay, rook takes e8, bishop takes e8, then bishop to c3, b takes c3, b takes c3. Now in this position, what would white do? Okay, so just know that our pawn is here and his bishop is here. That's the changes made. This pawn is no longer here, this pawn is no longer here, this rook's no longer here, this bishop's no longer here, and yeah, this rook's no longer here as well. Okay, so I mean, in this position, we could calculate maybe rook takes bishop. If rook takes bishop, then we are simply queening in the next move, and because the queening square is a dark square, no matter how many tempi white gets, he won't be able to get his bishop to protect this square. But if he takes the pawn, okay, so if he takes the pawn, then we'll play bishop takes on d3. Yeah, and we would still push this pawn to promotion. Yep. Okay, so that seems like it. Okay, next puzzle. Okay, so for this puzzle, we will again, before we look at the captures, the checks, captures, and threats, it's quite a complicated position, so we need to be aware of what is going on. Okay, it seems that white is threatening check over here, and may not seem potent at the moment, but it's just good to be aware of what checks are available. There's this, oops, these two checks. Yeah, so something that may look quite appealing to begin with is g2 check. But you see, if we play if he plays king g1, we don't really have a good follow up. And if we do something like queen takes e2, but it's not a check, it's not as forcing as a check, then immediately we can see that white has queen f7 check. And if we go up maybe to this is our only move, king e5, then he's got queen captures on f5, and in that position we are forced back here. But now he can play rook takes e4 check. Okay, he checks us, and he's gonna fork our queen as well. So we got to be careful of just pushing this pawn, just getting a check for the sake of getting a check. We need to be very careful and make sure that the opponent's threats are dealt with as well. Okay, so the next check that we see that seems feasible is queen f2 check. So if queen f2 check, he can't block with the rook. Queen f3 check. Rook f2, then queen just takes f2 and it'll be mate. So queen f3, he only has 2 squares to move to. And if he goes to f1, so what are the checks that we have, right? And you see we have this check over here. Queen f2 doesn't seem to make much sense because of rook takes f2. If the pawn takes, he just plays king f1, and he stops our pawn from moving. And sure, we have other checks like this, but he just captures our pawn. So maybe we could play this. Okay, let's consider that. Check here, he moves here, check. He captures. Check. Okay, and it's a double check, and he moves here. Check. Here. Promote to a queen. Check. And that is actually mate. You know, he still has one square here. No, he doesn't. That's covered by the bishop as well. Wow, wait, that's actually mate. I was looking at another line though. Check here. Okay, let's consider that again. Queen f3. King to g1. Bishop e3, rook takes e3, queen takes e3. Check. He moves up here. Queen takes f2. Check. Okay, so he moves up here. Yeah, and queen takes h2 is mate because he isn't able to come here. Okay, but if we check here and he goes over here, then we have this check here on h1, which forces him here again because our bishop's covering these squares. And oh wait, no, sorry, here. Then this is mate. Yeah, what am I saying? He can't move anywhere. Yeah, this is actually a back rank mate. Okay. Yeah, so the puzzle's over then. Okay, we've reached 51, so I guess we'll just stop here.